We have lots to discuss in today's video, including the latest on the Vancouver situation with Elias Pettersson and JT Miller. Plus, we have the latest on some rumors surrounding Mikko Rantanen. If he doesn't stay with Carolina, who else are we expected to pursue the big finish forward in free agency this summer? Plus, are the LA Kings considering shopping a top young defenseman with the return of Drew Doughty? We'll get into the latest reports from Kevin Weeks on that one. Plus, we have big news on Brandon Saad being on clearing waivers. Philip Grubauer going on waivers here today. Some big injury updates, including Caden Guhle in Montreal suffering a significant injury yesterday as well. All that, plus a big update on the team name for Utah and some more quarter-century teams announced today as well, coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss here in today's video. In case you missed it earlier, there is a video on the channel, but there is a lot of significant news from the waiver wire again here today. Of course, yesterday we had Blues forward Brandon Saad, the veteran forward who had this year and one more year with a $4.5 million cap hit on his contract, was put on waivers, and today we found out he indeed did clear. Cole Reinhardt of the Senators also cleared, so he's been reassigned to their AHL affiliate. We had been led to believe by the Blues and Doug Armstrong that Saad would likely report to Springfield should the veteran clear waivers. That doesn't sound like it's going to be the case anymore. We had reports earlier from Elliot Friedman suggesting that, and I think it's already been confirmed by the team and the management as well, that tomorrow Brandon Saad's going to be going back on waivers, but this time it's going to be on unconditional waivers for the purpose of contract termination. The player and the team and his representatives have mutually agreed to terminate the remaining part of his contract, and he will become an unrestricted free agent on Friday. So essentially the money that he has not been paid out on his contract, he's going to be giving that up, which is just a little bit north of $5 million. Of course, this year he would have earned the bulk of his contract, the way they're paid twice monthly. He wouldn't have a whole lot of pay remaining, so he would have made, like I said, a good chunk of his earnings this year. But next year, even though it's a $4.5 million cap hit, his actual salary was a little bit less. I think it was I believe it's $3.9 million. So between the $1 million or so he hasn't been paid yet this year and next year, it works out to be just over $5 million that he is sacrificing. He's betting on himself to go play somewhere else, get a better, new fresh start opportunity, and hopefully can portray that into a new contract to earn back that money. Essentially, the expectation is that for the remainder of this year, he's likely going to sign a contract that would be around $1 million, be a 1-year $1 million veteran special is kind of what he's likely looking at. Of course, he's not going to earn a full $1 million. That'll be a prorated contract for the remaining part of the season. And if he signs with a team that's going to the playoffs, as long as he signs and is on their roster before the NHL trade deadline, then he'll be eligible for playoffs. So it gives him an opportunity to go shop around, find an opportunity for himself that works out better. It also gives the Blues a big relief cap-wise. So this is mutually beneficial on both sides. If they can't find a trade and he doesn't want to go to the minors, and otherwise you're stuck with that contract for an extended time, this is a win-win for both sides. So clearly, will be interesting to see where Saad might end up. There should be no shortage of interest. I know for that kind of price tag, there's lots of teams looking for secondary scoring that probably was thinking they were going to have to trade for it ahead of the deadline. You're looking at teams like the Dallas Stars would be an interesting one. They have lots of cap space with the Tyler Seguin LTIR scenario. So Dallas might be an option. I know you're looking, in the Eastern Conference, even looking at teams like Toronto and Ottawa. They're both looking for some help. I think the Sens might be more likely than Toronto, to be honest. I think the Leafs would prefer a centerman. But in Ottawa, again, we don't know 100% what they're planning to do, but the belief is they're going to add, and that is a kind of player that they would want. Again, I can't say for sure that he's going to be a target of theirs. I would think that Washington's another possibility as well. They have some options there, and they're obviously a real strong team, so there won't be any shortage of options. He'll probably have 3 or 4 options in the East, probably another 3 or 4 options in the West. Wouldn't rule out the Avalanche either. Of course, he has played there before too, so we'll see what happens with Brandon Saad. Now, of course, the new waiver news today was Philip Grubauer of the Kraken going on waivers. I suspect he's going to clear tomorrow. Still has multiple years left on his contract. Has a 5-15-1 record this year with an 866 save percentage. He has never lived up to that contract. When they picked him as the member of the Avalanche and during the expansion draft, I mean, he was a free agent, but still counted towards the Avalanche losing a player. The contract they gave him, he's never lived up to it at all. He has not had a 900 or better save percentage during the entire run with the Kraken. Unfortunately, if you look at the year he had in Colorado right before that expansion and that situation, he was phenomenal. He had a goals against average under 2, and his save percentage was like 925 or something like that. So, like, it was insane what he did the year before with the Avalanche, but has never duplicated that or come anywhere close during his time with Seattle. So we'll find out tomorrow. I suspect he clears, and I think he'll be a buyout candidate in the summer unless they come up with a scenario like we saw with Saad, which I would be surprised if indeed that happened. A bunch of other injury updates around the NHL today, including a significant one in Montreal. We saw Caden Guhle of the Canadiens leave the game last night, and we found out today that it was a fairly serious situation where he ended up with a lacerated quad muscle. He ended up being taken to the hospital last night, and they did perform surgery. So he is going to be out. Right now they're calling it indefinitely, but it's believed to be you're probably looking at around a 6, 7, 8 week recovery. I think 6 weeks is probably more than fair to say is a minimum. They haven't labeled that just based on what I've seen with other types of injuries with different lacerations. They can take a long time to heal. It's pretty serious. Obviously, Guhle's a big member of the Habs D-Corps, plays a lot of big minutes for them, and of course they're finding themselves for the first time in a few years here in a race for a potential playoff spot. So that is definitely going to hurt for sure. So Guhle will be out a while. Obviously, with the Four Nation break coming up, it'll somewhat minimize the amount of games he's going to have to miss. But I would suspect, given the situation, if you look at the calendar, you're probably looking at about mid-March, anywhere from mid-March to late March, somewhere in there would be likely when he makes his return. But we'll see. Crazier things have happened. Sometimes things go differently, but that's what we can expect right now. In Ottawa, as I mentioned, Cole Reinhardt was sent back to the American Hockey League. We did get a more defined timetable on Nick Cousins, who suffered a knee injury as well against the Leafs the other night. They're calling him about 6 to 8 weeks. Apparently, he's still seeking out a second opinion as well. That could change, but right now, that's roughly the timeline, according to Travis Green, the head coach there. And Linus Ullmark continues to skate. It's looking like between the Thursday game against Washington or the Saturday game against Minnesota, that he likely will play in one of those games, probably backs up in the other. So good news for Ottawa on that front. Drew Doughty made his return to the Kings lineup tonight. Of course, that caused a healthy scratch for Brandt Clarke. We're going to talk a little bit further about Brandt Clarke and some other reports regarding the youngster. But Doughty came back. Kings lost the game to the Panthers. He played over 23 minutes. So the Kings coaching staff even said that they were going to try to ease him in, considering he hasn't played all season. But they even admitted pregame that he probably won't be eased in as much as we'd like, because coaches tend to overplay players, especially that they rely on heavily with veterans like that. And there was no different there. So he's probably going to sit out the next game and then play the one after. He certainly wants to be considered for Four Nations for Team Canada, since they need a defenseman to replace Alex Pietrangelo. So we'll see if Doughty gets enough games and impresses enough to impress the Canadian brass to select him to be that guy. New Jersey captain Nico Hischier is out, and he's listed as week to week. The Devils picked up a huge thumping over the Philadelphia Flyers tonight. Jake Allen with the shutout. Detroit plays tomorrow. They're going to still be without Patrick Kane. He will miss at least one more game. I believe there's a chance. I'm not sure about Confer, and Tarasenko still might be question marks too, but the Kane is definitely not going to be in the lineup for the Red Wings, and they need to find some victories here soon, or they're at risk of falling out of the race. In Vancouver, some updates there. Kiefer Sherwood moved to injured reserve, so that's not good for them. They're in Nashville tonight. Max Sasson goes back to the American Hockey League, and they activated from IR Dakota Joshua and Noah Juleson. As I mentioned, we got big news today on the Utah Hockey Club and their search for a final team name. Unfortunately, as we reported last week, the Utah Yeti cannot be a name that can be considered as much as it's been the favorite. I know apparently what's happened here is when they went for trademarking, they ran into issues with the Yeti Cooler Company, I think is their official name. So most of you are probably familiar with Yeti. They make coolers and drinkware and all kinds of merchandise, around keeping your drinks cold and good for camping and all that kind of stuff. I know I've got some Yeti stuff. It's great products. But because of the name, the trademark, people give them a hard time because of, confusion between the brands. So they had an opportunity. They had up to 90 days to kind of go back and forth and try to fight this. Apparently, they did have some conversations with Yeti themselves to see if they could work this out, and it sounds like that wasn't going to be the case. So, unfortunately, as much as everybody loves Yeti, and it sounds like it was the preferred name, it's not going to be an option for them. So they are going to a fan vote to determine the name, and they have a final three. One of these names I've never even heard of before. During the whole process, they've been going through all this other voting and everything. So the three options are one, they leave it as the Utah Hockey Club, two, the Utah Mammoth, and three, the Utah Wasatch, Wasatch. I'm not even sure what in the heck that is. I had to look it up, and I think it's something to do with mountains or something, but like the Wasatch? I'm not even sure if I'm saying that right. But apparently with Mammoth and Hockey Club, they even had some trademarking issues as well, but they believe they can be overcome. With the Utah Hockey Club, apparently the concerns were that it was going to be confusing with soccer, where soccer teams and, obviously use that type of naming. I don't like Hockey Club myself just because they're a hockey club, but there's nothing unique about that. So I would pick Mammoth here in this scenario. We'll see. So how it's going to work is the next 4 home games, fans in attendance will be able to cast their vote, and we'll see what the winning vote ends up being. So we'll know in the not too distant future what this name is going to be. As I mentioned, we got a couple more of the quarter-century teams announced by the NHL today. One being Nashville, one being Los Angeles. So the LA Kings quarter-century teams are as follows. Team 1 is a trio of forwards including Dustin Brown, Anze Kopitar, and Jeff Carter. On the back end, we've got Drew Doughty and Alec Martinez. And between the pipes, Jonathan Quick. Team 2 for the Los Angeles Kings quarter-century team includes a forward trio of Adrian Kempe, Justin Williams, Mr. Game 7, and Zygmunt Palffy. On the back end, you've got Nordstrom and Wisnowski, and between the pipes, Felix the Cat Potvin. So obviously, a few members there of the, you got Kopitar, Doughty, Kempe from the current team. So some interesting names there nonetheless. Nashville also had theirs announced today. Team 1 for the quarter-century team for the Nashville Predators includes Mike Fisher, Philip Forsberg, and Paul Kariya. On the back end, you've got Roman Josi and Shea Weber, along with Pekka Rinne between the pipes. Team number 2 is at forward. You got Ryan Johansson, David Legwand, and Steve Sullivan. On the back end, you got Kimmo Timonen, Matthias Ekholm, and UC Saros between the pipes. Big difference between Team 1 and Team 2 there for sure. Now, as I mentioned, onto the rumor mill around the NHL. Let's start with Mikko Rantanen's potential free agency. Of course, the big Finnish winger was just traded in the last few days from the Avalanche to the Hurricanes, largely over the fact of his asking price on a new contract was well beyond what they were willing to go to, and they felt that the team wasn't deep enough as it stands, and if they pay him this absorbent contract, that they're going to struggle with that even further into the future, and they felt they would be a better team by trading him and kind of changing up the mix. So, of course, he goes to Carolina. Now, the Carolina Hurricanes, for all intents and purposes, from what we're hearing, are going to push hard to keep him, and it sounds like even though he would become by far the team's highest paid player, that they're willing to do that, and I think that they're not too, leery of going up in the 13 to 14 million range, which is rumored what he wanted to stay in Colorado. Now, he's great friends, longtime buddies with Sebastian Aho. They've played together at lower levels when they were younger. Obviously, fellow countryman, great friend. So they're going to obviously use Aho's influence as much as possible to help keep him. But there's already rumors floating about what teams are going to go after Rantanen if he makes it to free agency on July 1st. We saw some reports from a few different insiders saying the Edmonton Oilers. And yes, they'd figure out a way to do that. For the Oilers to sign Rantanen, they'd probably have to move a guy like Bouchard, I would think. They've already got McDavid. Obviously he needs a new contract extension soon. They just got Draisaitl done at $14 million. Draisaitl and Rantanen, I believe, have the same agent. And, is there a conspiracy for them to play together? I don't know. But at the end of the day, I just don't know how the Oilers could make that work. Can you imagine? They re-sign McDavid for a ridiculous amount. They've got Leon at 14. They get Rantanen at 14. They'd have no depth. I'm not really sure that we're going to see that, but some people out there think it could happen. Another team, though, according to Mark Lazarus of The Athletic, he says the Chicago Blackhawks really want to try to get a hold of Mikko Rantanen. They really want to bring in an elite player or two. They're going to have the cap space to do it for sure. They want to bring in some top talent to work with Connor Bedard and take this team up a level. They can sense the frustration already for how the losing has been weighing on a lot of the players, especially youngsters like Bedard, and they want to definitely take things forward next year. So be curious to see what happens. I do think the odds are decent he stays in Carolina for everything we're hearing. So we'll see. But obviously lots of speculation already about his future, and he's only been with the Hurricanes for a handful of days here so far. Now, as I mentioned as well, Kevin Weeks had an interesting report out earlier saying a player to watch is youngster with the LA Kings, top right-handed defenseman, Brandt Clarke. Now, of course, Brandt Clarke was a healthy scratch tonight as the Kings got Drew Doughty back after missing the entire season. Now, in my predictions that I made at the beginning of the season, because Drew Doughty, of course, was hurt in the preseason, we knew he was going to be out a significant time. I said that Brandt Clarke was really going to have a breakthrough season and lead that decor in scoring and become a much bigger, kind of lock down a role. And early on, it looked like he was doing that. And he's still the highest scoring defenseman they have. But you can tell in the last little while, his ice time has slowly been clawed back. And it's kind of worked his way from, playing 20 minutes a night down at 17, 16, 15 to now he's in the press box. And head coach Jim Hiller kind of said, it's tough on young guys like him to play in the league and have such a demanding role. And that they felt like a reset, for example, might be beneficial, and we'll see where things go. Now, I guess, like he said, we'll see where things go. But now Kevin Weeks is saying they might consider trading this youngster, which I think would be absolutely crazy. Drew Doughty is a great defenseman. He's a leader. He's been there a long time. He's not going to be there forever. Brandt Clarke could be the heir apparent to Drew Doughty. What sense would it make to trade this guy? I think it'd be absolutely ridiculous. But I can tell you that teams will line up to get their hands on this phenomenal young player, if indeed that is the case from Kevin Weeks, if this is true. Obviously there's a lot of teams out there. I don't think I need to list any specifically. I think you're going to have a high volume of teams would be very, very interested in Brandt Clarke. Now, why they would move this kid, I don't know. So we'll see if Kevin Weeks' report has any weight or not, but certainly an interesting thing to hear as Drew Doughty makes his return. Now, with Four Nations as well, we don't know if Drew is going to be going to Team Canada or not. I know they're looking at a bunch of defensemen. I think Mackenzie Weegar's in that conversation as well. And we'll see. I know in Sweden's case as well, which I didn't mention earlier, is Sammy Ersson of the Flyers has been announced to be replacing Jacob Markstrom of the Devils, who had to pull out due to injury. So right now, he's going to probably be the number 3. Linus Ullmark and Philip Gustafsson are still going as of right now for the Swedish team. So they'll still have pretty strong goaltending overall. Now, the Vancouver stuff, again, we don't have a lot of new intel, but it sounds like when it comes to the Pettersson and Miller, with JT Miller, I know Dave Pagnotta was talking earlier that Miller would really like to have the situation resolved as soon as possible, sooner than later. Based on Jim Rutherford's interview that we discussed yesterday as well in the Globe and Mail, it sure sounds like part of the rationale behind doing that interview was to kind of let it be known that they're getting lowballed on offers and that they're not going to give them away for nothing as much as they want the situation resolved. They need a better return. Jim also went on to talk a lot about what had caused everything and how he doesn't see a way out of it, that the two, aren't going to be able to make up and move on here. It's just kind of unfortunate. He also went on to say that, and there was also a quotes too from the author of the article of the Globe and Mail saying that when Pettersson was signing his long-term deal, that Rutherford warned him that, with this contract's going to come that much more, expectations, that much more pressure. You're in a Canadian market, that much more preparation. And he kind of seemed to think, I know some people kind of question how ready Pettersson was for training camp. Is there any issues that way? He hasn't been the same the last part of last year and this year. And, I think teams would love to be talking about Pettersson. I just think they're concerned over the what Pettersson are they getting? If he's the 100-point Pettersson that can do that consistently at his age, and he'll be a great pickup. From what I've seen, the New York Islanders are going to be a team to watch. We haven't talked about the Islanders a lot, but we've seen some reports suggesting that they're suddenly hot again, 5-game winning streak. They're by no means are they in the mix, 100% here, but they're not out of it either. At the same time with Pettersson, I don't think even if they were able to make a trade for Pettersson, it may not even happen now. It might be in the offseason, but it might be more of a case of, for looking for years beyond, not so much the current season, right? I know even Vancouver media, a lot of them were talking today about Pettersson to the Islanders for Bo Horvat, or JT Miller for that matter. Miller for Horvat, who says no, because this team has really created a lot of their own problems. They traded Horvat, they kept Miller, they knew the history there. Pettersson signs. I think they could have avoided a lot of this stuff. But another name to watch too is Brock Boeser in Vancouver. Again, lots of reports today that there's no contract talks, and it's very much expected that Boeser is going to be dealt. So as we talked about yesterday, Miller, Pettersson, Boeser, all very much on the market. So with Pettersson, the teams that are getting the most attention right now for a Pettersson trade would be a combination of Buffalo, Ottawa, and the Islanders. We've heard about JT Miller. The Rangers really haven't heard much lately, but he has control, and the control here would be more so about going to the Rangers. We have heard a little bit about JT to the Islanders too, but I think that was just really more than anything, it'd be comical to see Miller traded for Horvat. I don't think there's actually any legit chance of it actually happening. But the other team that for Miller, from what we've heard, that could be kind of a low-key, under-the-radar surprise team would be Columbus. Columbus is having a good season, better than expected. Fair to say that management team there, and they're going to want to reward those guys. See if they can't get into the playoffs. A guy like Miller, somebody who can play down the middle and be an intense guy, could be great for them. The Columbus Blue Jackets also have some very interesting assets that could be very intriguing to the Canucks as well for future. They've got a lot of interesting young talent there that, could get a deal done. It wouldn't be shocking. So, again, the Jackets could be a surprise team for Miller. But based on that interview yesterday from Rutherford and all the Vancouver media talking today, I think the belief now more than ever is that the odds are high that we see a Miller and a Pettersson trade. I think a Miller trade in season is more likely. A Pettersson trade may or may not happen till the off season. And if I were Vancouver, I'd probably move Miller first. See how Pettersson responds. See how everything goes. If you can get Pettersson back to his old self, 100-point player without Miller being there, then maybe you don't do anything. But if you're not convinced that he's going to live up to that contract and you're not convinced he's a guy you can win with, maybe you make a move too. I don't know. It's hard to say. Obviously there's lots of talk to. I mean, one of the things that came up too from Rutherford was, a lot of it was that they let kind of Rick Tocchet handle the dynamic between Miller and Pettersson. And one of the things I think that was the way things were handled was, they all kind of knew that they needed to get more out of Pettersson, and they kind of know that JT Miller was the kind of player to push them. And, I think they kind of festered everything internally. They're all to blame for what's there and how it's all public now. Like every team, I'm sure, has guys that don't like each other, but you don't hear about it. And like I said, a lot of this, in my opinion, was just handled really, really poorly, and it could end up with a Canuck team completely dismantled here in the not too distant future. But we'll see. I know a guy like Boeser is going to get lots of attention. Again, looking at guys, teams like Minnesota, Ottawa, Dallas, maybe Toronto, teams that they're all wanting to add, top 6, top 9 scoring. The problem too with some of these players too are going to be what they're making for money. It's going to be complicated, right? So I know the Sharks are another team very much to watch with all of this too. The problem with San Jose and some of their trade targets is that they don't have any salary retention spots. So moving some of their guys are going to be more complicated. So let me know what you think of all of today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.